Finally this evening, for our young entrepreneurs, we're going to bring forth David Alade, who is the co-founder and managing partner of Century Partners. David was born and raised a native New Yorker, and after graduating with a degree in urban studies and economics from Columbia University in 2009, he pursued a career on Wall Street where he focused on providing an array of secured financing solutions for consumer finance companies. In the summer of 2014, David fell in love with the charismatic energy burning within the city of Detroit and began financially investing in its neighborhoods. He moved to Detroit in May of 2015 to focus on community advocacy and real estate development in Detroit's urban neighborhoods on a full-time basis. Let's welcome David Alade.
Yes.
All right, how's everybody doing today? It's good. It seems like a little loud over here than over here. You guys are excited? Woo! There we go. First of all, I'd like to thank Professor Tarver for inviting me here today. I'm seeing him in the audience. He stepped out. He just stepped out. All right. Good time, Professor. I think where I'll start is I'll tell you guys a little bit about me. See the next slide. Do the next one. So I'm from a small town called South Jamaica, Queens in New York City. And when I was in 7th grade, I was plucked from my underperforming public school and placed into private school on Upper East Side of Manhattan. Two very, very different worlds. And that was my first experience really understanding how sharp the inequity is from a wealth perspective, economic perspective, from an educational perspective, from a health and medical perspective. That existed in the world from my small town of South Jamaica, Queens to the Upper East Side. After graduating high school, I went to Columbia and then started a career on Wall Street in investment banking. I think every step along the way, I got a better idea and kept nagging just how wide this inequity was, particularly along, I'd say, race-specific and neighborhood-specific variables. About 2 years ago, I think I couldn't ignore that feeling anymore, and I reached out to my business partner, Andrew Cologne. We met at Columbia. We're in the same fraternity. He's a little bit older than me. And we've been talking about Detroit for probably 4 years. And initially, it was very, very negative on Detroit. I had worked in Detroit. I worked for Ford, Chrysler, GM, helped them raise money to navigate bankruptcy. So my first interaction with the city was very negative. Andrew had a more enlightened, I would say, perception of what was happening here. 2 years ago, I decided I had to do something about that nagging disparity. For me, I kind of saw the epicenter of all those other inequities really coming from wealth, just huge wealth disparities within particularly areas and cities, inner cities of color. And if you look at how wealth is created, the majority of it really is in home ownership with owner-occupied homes or renter-occupied homes. 70% of all U.S. wealth comes through those means. So 2 years ago, we took a trip to Detroit. We walked through maybe 10 neighborhoods, sun up to sundown. We talked to whoever managed to talk to us. I'm sure we annoyed lots of people. We knocked on doors to really get a sense of what was happening here. Who was living here? What was going on? How people were feeling. And I think at that point, I fell in love with the city in a completely different way. And I think Andrew, we fell in love with the city in a very distinct way. And it was something here, not only away from the fact that you could get cheap properties that were beautiful, just really aesthetically beautiful, but it was something in talking to people. It was a powerful sense that something special was happening at this juncture. That the city, relative to decades in the past, with false promises, the change that was happening here, the revitalization was sustainable. And his responsibility on those individuals to make sure that the change that was happening be delivered in a more equitable way. Cue next slide. So we started probably 2 years ago. This is effectively what we do. We buy homes in the neighborhoods of Detroit. We try to find neighborhoods target neighborhoods that are outside of downtown and midtown. Most of the investment today, both public and private, have come in downtown, midtown, so some folk town. 95% of the people of Detroit live in neighborhoods, and that's where we're focused our development efforts. We target primarily vacant homes, abandoned homes in specific areas. We execute high-quality rehabs of these homes, and we find the right demographic that we want to live in these homes. The right demographic, away from people who are going to pay the rent every single month on time. That's very, very important to build a sustainable business model. We want people that are ready to contribute to the neighborhood, that want to live in the neighborhood, that want to be in a diverse space, that want to live in what folks call a diverse environment. We found that to be really the most important component of what shapes how a neighborhood feels, how it looks, and ultimately people's desire to live there. We started with one house in June of 2014. To the next slide. Over a year, we bought about 11 more houses. And really high quality renovations, we started attracting really interesting tenants to the area. We built a team of general contractors and subcontractors. They're effectively like our family, guys that we can rely on, that we can trust, and we work consistently and reliably. We've knocked on every single door on the street, Atkinson Street. Atkinson Street is just south of a neighborhood called Boston, and in the Boston, sure, just south. I can't go on this side and that side. And I think over a year we saw some really, really fascinating developments. The one, I think, the way people interacted with us changed dramatically. When we first started knocking on doors, and we knocked on doors before we lived in one single hammer, there was a lot of skepticism. And I think people had seen the story before. Folks come from New York, come from Mississippi, come from out of town, buy homes, effectively slumlord them out, and become drains in the community. Over time, they saw the folks that we were bringing into the neighborhood. They saw the work we were doing. They saw that we were making sure the lawns were being taken care of, the snow was being removed. They saw the security we were providing to the neighborhood. They saw that we were there every single day and who lived on the street on my business park. They saw that we were here to stay. And now those folks are some of our greatest advocates. Over time, I think the two main dynamics we also witnessed. One, other folks would see what we were doing. We were rehabbing anywhere between 4 and 5 houses at a time. They see some activity. They have a quick conversation with us to check in on what's going on. And then magically, a week or two later, they had a house that they were working on. So these are investors coming in. More interestingly, we saw long-time Detroiters who now, instead of living next to a vacant, dilapidated structure, they'll live next to a beautifully renovated home. Filled with people, neighbors that were respectful of them, and that wanted to engage with them. And now, in an economic sense, let me get around to fixing their roof, or fixing their porch, or paying more attention to their lawn. So over the course of the year, we saw a dramatic transformation just by buying and renovating these 15 houses. After seeing the success there, we decided to move into another area called the North End of Detroit. Is anyone familiar with the North End? So just about a mile east of our properties, our homes on Atkinson Street. And we employed a similar strategy. We really wanted to get a number of homes in a very specific area. So there we've got about a 5 by 2 block area. We teamed up with a community partner, a guy who had grown up in the North End his entire life, who had done work there, who owned business there, who owned property there, and also was a general contractor. So with him, we were able to identify properties to buy and rehab, and extend the model that we had developed in Atkinson Street and bring it to our second neighborhood in the North End. One thing I'm really proud of is before moving to Detroit, I was able to raise some money from friends and family to invest in what we were doing here. One thing we can do, by nature of the way we raise money, we create a fund structure. And in that fund structure, you have Detroiters who save their blocks, save their neighborhoods for the reasons why we're investing in the first place. They can sell us a home that they bought for $500 or $1,000 4 or 5 years ago from the Wayne County tax auction. There's been some natural appreciation. We can agree on a sales price, and they can determine what percentage of cash versus equity they would like to sell a home for us. So for example, let's say they bought us for $500, and now it's worth $20,000. They come to us and say, we love what you're doing, we want to be involved, I don't have the $100,000 required to renovate the house in the way I would like to. We can take that $20,000, they can get half up front in cash and half in equity. And in so doing, not only do they retain ownership of that one house that they save, or the block that they save, the neighborhood they live in, but they also retain ownership in all the other homes across their neighborhood that we own. And for me, more importantly, the wealth that we create. the appreciation that we've already delivered to the neighborhood and hope to continue delivering to the neighborhood in these two areas. This is an example of one of the houses we purchased, and I put the financials here because I think it's really important to be able to, when thinking about a business, not only think about the good you're delivering, but also the sustainability. And for us, for this thing to be sustainable, it's got to make money, and it's got to be profitable. So this is one home we purchased from a young woman, a woman who lives in the neighborhood. She lives 2 houses down, and it's one of the cash equity combination deals we were able to develop with it. It's a single-family home, about five bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and we currently have a guy who owns his own startup, his girlfriend, who's an engineer at Ford, on an urban farm. Get the next slide. This is a property we purchased in the North End. So the first one was Access, this is the North End. This one we just finished about 2 months ago. It's a 4-unit building. There's kind of 2 units on each side. And this has been very fascinating in terms of the real diversity we've been able to bring here. We have nurses, we have tech folks, we've got engineers, we have waitresses and cooks and chefs, and they're all been brought to this neighborhood and contributing, interacting with their neighbors, and I think a very interesting and thoughtful way. Next one. When thinking of why we're supposed to move to Detroit and why I'm here, I talked about at the outset the feelings of inequity, the actual inequity that I experienced growing up in South Bend, Queens, and moving through these various phases in my life. In New York, in a traditional development model, particularly in areas where it's primarily a renter community, which is New York, Chicago, San Fran, which is LA, when developers come in, folks just get displaced. They're renters, and they have to go to a place where there's cheaper rent. That's affordable. And this has happened throughout my entire life. Whether going up to Queens, going to Brooklyn, going to school up in Harlem. Detroit is incredibly unique. Detroit, we have an opportunity to just buy vacant houses, houses that are dilapidated, that are in poor repair, where no one's living, and invest in these homes, and activate them, and engage in the community in a really thoughtful way. Detroit has one of the highest percentages of home ownership in the country, or top 20 city. Detroit has one of the highest percentages of black ownership, or top 30 city in the country. So we have an opportunity to do all these great things, to bring resources to the neighborhood, to bring increased security and safety and attention, and increase wealth without displacing the folks who make the neighborhood unique in the first place. And in fact, the people who benefit the most, I think, are primarily 2 populations. There's one, the folks who live in the neighborhood stuck with Detroit through the worst of times. I think those are the most grittiest and committed and friendly and outgoing, engaging folks I've ever met in my entire life. They're the ones who are seeing the appreciation in their homes. They're the ones who are now recapturing some of the wealth that was lost over the past decades. And 2 is the contractors. The contractors we use are folks who are not getting the jobs with the big firms in downtown and midtown. These are small operations. They too discovered Detroit. Some folks who have never even touched Detroit. We struggled in the beginning to find contractors. It was these folks whose families have lived and worked in Detroit for decades. Those are the guys we're using to do the work. And we spent millions of dollars giving money to these families to do the work and bring some of these abandoned structures past time. I think that's all I